My husband brought his mistress to our family dinner, sat her right next to me, at my table, in my seat, introduced her as his friend from work, and this woman looked me dead in my eyes, smiled, and said, "Your husband talks about you all the time." I smiled back. Because what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, is that I'm a forensic accountant. I trace stolen money for a living, and I had already found the $47,000 my husband had been hiding in a secret account with her name on it. She thought she was meeting the wife. She was meeting her worst nightmare. He gave her a Tiffany bracelet worth $4,800, told me the same bracelet was too expensive 3 weeks before my birthday. I got a Target gift card. She got the diamonds. But here's the thing about being married to an accountant. Every receipt tells a story. Every transaction leaves a trail. Every lie has a dollar sign attached to it. And I followed every single one. If you want to see how I destroyed both of them without ever raising my voice, hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video so more women can learn what I learned. And comment below, tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know how far this message reaches, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It's a blueprint. For every woman who's ever been played. For every wife who's been called crazy when she knew something was wrong. For every mother who's been disrespected in her own home. Now let me take you back to that dinner, and let me show you exactly what happens when a man underestimates the wrong woman. My name is Monica James. I'm 38 years old, and for 14 years I thought I had the perfect marriage. Darnell and I met at church. We were both 24, both hopeful, both believing that God had brought us together for a reason. He was tall, charming, had a smile that could light up a room. When he proposed after 2 years of dating, I cried so hard my mascara ran down to my chin. We built everything together, or at least that's what I thought. I worked my way up from junior accountant to senior forensic accountant at a Fortune 500 company. 12 years of late nights of studying for certifications, of proving myself in rooms full of men who thought a black woman couldn't possibly understand complex financial crimes. But I did understand. I understood better than most of them. I made $125,000 a year. I paid for our house with the inheritance my grandmother left me. $95,000 for the down payment. Every single mortgage payment for 14 years came from my account. Darnell was a regional sales manager. Good job, $95,000 a year. But somehow his money was always tied up in investments, or between commission checks, or being saved for something big. So I paid. I always paid. I paid when our son Jalen needed braces. I paid when our daughter Imani wanted dance lessons. I paid for the vacations, the car repairs, the Christmas presents, the school supplies. And I never complained, because that's what good wives do, right? We hold it down. We keep the family together. We sacrifice. Looking back now, I can see the signs. They were everywhere. I just didn't want to believe what they were telling me. 6 months before that dinner, things started changing. His phone was always face down on the table. For 14 years, that man left his phone face up without a care in the world. Suddenly, it was always flipped over, always on silent, always just out of my reach. He started working late. 3 nights a week turned into 4, then 5. He'd come home at 10, 11 o'clock, smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't mine, and claiming it was just a long day at the office. There was new cologne in his bathroom cabinet. I didn't buy it. He never wore cologne for me. But suddenly, he was spending 15 minutes in front of the mirror every morning spraying himself with something that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. And then there was the gym. Darnell hadn't stepped foot in a gym in 10 years. But at 40 years old, suddenly he needed a premium membership at some fancy fitness center across town. Not the one 5 minutes from our house. The one that was conveniently close to the business district where he had meetings. I'm not stupid. I knew what these signs meant, but every time I brought it up, he made me feel like I was losing my mind. Monica, you're being paranoid. Monica, I'm working hard for this family, for you, for the kids, and this is the thanks I get. Monica, why can't you just trust me after everything we've been through? And I believed him, because I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too painful. Because I had given this man 14 years of my life, 2 beautiful children, and every ounce of love I had. The alternative meant all of that was a lie. So I pushed the doubt down. I told myself I was overthinking. I told my mother I was fine when she asked if everything was okay. I told my girlfriends that Darnell was just stressed with work, but the doubt never really went away. It just sat there in my chest, growing heavier every day. And then I noticed the money. $2,000 here, $3,500 there. Withdrawals from our savings account that I never authorized. Charges on our joint credit card for restaurants I'd never been to. Hotels I'd never stayed in. A jewelry store I'd never visited. When I asked Darnell about it, he had answers ready. Always ready. Too ready. Business expenses, baby. You know how it is with clients. Investment opportunity. Didn't want to bother you with the details. Conference fees. They reimbursed me, don't worry. I'm a forensic accountant. I investigate financial fraud for a living. I've put people in prison for less obvious lies than the ones my husband was telling me. But I still wanted to believe him. Until the night I couldn't anymore. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my light days at work. I came home early around 4 o'clock planning to start dinner and surprise the kids. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Darnell's car wasn't in the driveway, which was strange because he'd texted me at lunch saying he was working from home that afternoon. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he'd run out for groceries. Maybe he'd picked up the kids early. I set my bag down and went to check our joint account to see if I needed to transfer money for the mortgage payment that was due the next day. I opened the banking app on my phone, and my heart stopped. Account balance $347. That couldn't be right. My paycheck had been deposited on Friday. There should have been at least $4,800 in that account. That was our bill money, our mortgage money, our living money. I refreshed the app. Same number. $347. I started scrolling through the transaction history, and what I saw made my hands shake so badly I almost dropped my phone. ATM withdrawal $1,000. 2 days ago. ATM withdrawal $1,500. 5 days ago. ATM withdrawal $2,000. Last week. All cash. All Darnell. Our mortgage was due tomorrow. $2,400. And we had $347. I sat down on the kitchen floor, still in my work clothes, and I started digging deeper. The credit card statements I'd been too tired to look at closely. The bank statements I'd let pile up in the filing cabinet. The financial picture I'd trusted my husband to help me maintain. It was all there. Everything I'd been too afraid to see. Charges at luxury hotels in our city. Not out of town for conferences. Right here. In the same city where we'd built our life. Dinners at restaurants that cost $200, $300 a meal. For 2 people. Always 2. A charge at a jewelry store for $4,800. I knew that amount. I knew it because I'd been looking at a bracelet in the Tiffany's window last month when Darnell and I were downtown. I'd pointed at it and said, "That's beautiful." He'd looked at the price tag and said, "Too expensive. Maybe for your birthday." My birthday was 3 weeks before I saw that charge. He'd given me a gift card. $50 to Target. Said money was tight. $4,800 wasn't too expensive. It just wasn't for me. I was still sitting on that kitchen floor, surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, when I found the document that changed everything. It was on the kitchen table, just sitting there like it didn't matter, like I'd never notice. An opened envelope from a law firm. Inside a lease agreement, a luxury apartment downtown. 2 bedrooms, $2,400 a month, and 2 names on the lease. Darnell James and Brittany Wells. I didn't know who Brittany Wells was. Not yet. But I was about to find out. Because that lease started next month. Which meant my husband wasn't just cheating on me. He was planning to leave me. He was going to take the money he'd stolen from our family and start a new life with another woman, in an apartment that cost more than our mortgage. While I scrambled to figure out how to pay our bills, I sat there for a long time. I don't know how long. The light changed outside the windows, the house got darker, and something inside me changed too. I stopped crying. I stopped shaking. I got very, very quiet, and I got to work, because Darnell had made a mistake, a big one. He'd married an accountant, and he'd spent 14 years underestimating what that meant. I knew how to trace money. I knew how to build a case. I knew how to find every single dollar, every single transaction, every single lie. And I was going to use every bit of that knowledge to take back everything he thought he was going to steal from me. But first, I needed to play the game. I needed him to think I didn't know anything. I needed him to keep making mistakes. So when he came home at 8 o'clock that night smelling like that expensive perfume again, I smiled. "Hey, baby," I said. "Dinner's on the stove. How was your day?" He kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. Long day. "I'm exhausted." "I bet you are," I thought. But what I said was, "Why don't you go take a shower? I'll make you a plate." And while he was in the shower, I photographed every document in his briefcase. Saved them to a cloud account he didn't know existed. Started building the case that was going to destroy him. He thought he was the one playing me. He had no idea the game had just changed. 2 weeks after I found that lease, Darnell came home with a suggestion that made my blood run cold. "Baby, I've been thinking," he said, settling onto the couch like he didn't have a care in the world. "We should have a family dinner. Get everyone together. Your parents, my Mama Marcus and Denise. Make it a real event." I looked up from the book I was pretending to read. "A family dinner. You hate family dinners." He laughed. That charming laugh that used to make my heart flutter. Now it just made my stomach turn. I know. But I've been thinking about how important family is, you know. We get so caught up in work and the kids and all our separate lives. We should come together more often. Something was wrong. This man hadn't voluntarily suggested a family gathering in our entire 14-year marriage. Every holiday, every birthday, every celebration, I had to drag him kicking and screaming to be present with my family. Now he wanted to host dinner. "That sounds nice," I said carefully. "When were you thinking?" "This Saturday. And actually, I wanted to invite someone from work, too, a colleague. She's new in town, doesn't really know anyone. I thought it might be nice to include her. Christian thing to do." She. There it was. "A colleague." I kept my voice neutral. "Who?" "Just someone from the regional office, Brittany. She transferred here a few months ago, doesn't have any friends or family nearby. I felt bad for her eating alone every night." Brittany. Brittany Wells. The same Brittany Wells whose name was on that apartment lease with my husband's. He was going to bring his mistress into my home, sit her at my table, introduce her to my children. And he thought I didn't know. For one long moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The audacity of this man, the absolute disrespect, the cruelty of pretending to be a good Christian helping out a lonely colleague when he was really rubbing my face in his betrayal. But I didn't let any of that show on my face. I had learned in those 2 weeks how to wear a mask so perfect that even my mirror couldn't see through it. "That's really thoughtful of you, baby," I said. "Sure, let's do it." He smiled like he'd won something. "Great. Saturday at 6. I'll let everyone know." I smiled back. "I'll start planning the menu." After he went to bed that night, I sat in the kitchen for 3 hours. I thought about canceling, about confronting him right then and there, about calling my cousin Keisha, who's a divorce attorney, and having her draw up papers before that woman ever set foot in my house. But then I realized something. If I confronted him now, he'd have time to hide things, move money, create explanations, get his story straight. But if I let him bring her here, if I watched them together, if I gathered evidence while he thought he was fooling me, I would have everything I needed to take him down. So I decided to host the best family dinner of my life. And I decided to let my husband hang himself with his own rope. The next few days were a performance worthy of an Oscar. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I needed to keep my hands busy while my mind was racing with plans. I planned an elaborate menu. Roast chicken, mac and cheese from scratch collard greens, cornbread sweet potato pie. All the dishes that made my family gatherings special. All the dishes I'd perfected over years of trying to be the perfect wife. I pressed my good tablecloth, polished the silverware, set the dining room table with the china my grandmother had left me. The same grandmother who left me the money for this house. The house Darnell thought he was going to take from me. My mother called on Friday night. She always knew when something was wrong with me, even when I tried to hide it. "Baby, you sure about this dinner?" Mama Gloria's voice was careful probing. "I'm sure, Mama. Darnell wants to have everyone over. It'll be nice." There was a long pause. "And this woman from his work, this colleague, you met her before." "No, Mama, but Darnell says she's new in town, doesn't know anyone. He's just being hospitable." Mm-hmm. That one sound carried 14 years of my mother's doubts about my husband. All the times she'd held her tongue because she didn't want to interfere. All the concerns she'd pushed down because she wanted to respect my choices. "Mama, I know what you're thinking." "Do you, baby?" "Because what I'm thinking is that my daughter deserves better, has always deserved better, and I've been waiting a long time for her to see what I see." I closed my eyes. "I see it, Mama. I see everything now." Another pause, longer this time. "What do you need from me, Monica?" "I need you to come to this dinner. I need you to watch everything, and I need you to trust me when I say I have a plan." "Okay, baby, I'll be there. And whatever you're planning, I'm with you." Saturday morning came faster than I expected. I woke up at 5 in the morning, heart pounding, stomach churning, not with nervousness, with anticipation. Darnell was already awake, which was unusual. He was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, trimming his beard more carefully than he had in years. "You're up early," I said from the doorway. "Couldn't sleep, excited about today." He smiled at me in the mirror. "It's going to be a good day, baby." "I'm sure it will be." I went downstairs to start cooking. For the next 8 hours, I threw myself into the food, into the preparation, into making everything perfect. The kids helped where they could. Jalen set the table. Imani folded the napkins into fancy shapes she'd learned from YouTube. "Mom, why is Dad so dressed up?" Jalen asked at one point, glancing toward the stairs where Darnell had just passed in his best suit. "He wants to look nice for our guests, I guess." Jalen frowned. "He doesn't usually try this hard for Grandma." No, he doesn't. "Just help me with these napkins, baby." By 5 o'clock, everything was ready. The house smelled incredible. The table was set beautifully. I had changed into a simple but elegant dress, done my makeup more carefully than usual, made sure I looked like exactly what I was the woman of this house. At 5:30, the doorbell rang for the first time. Mama Gloria and my stepfather Earl were first. Mama took one look around the house, one look at my face, and nodded slightly. She understood. Something was happening tonight, and she was ready for whatever I needed. Darnell's mother, Shirley, arrived next, already complaining before she was fully through the door. "Monica, this house is cold. Don't you know how to work the thermostat? And those flowers on the table, are they supposed to look like that?" "Hello to you too, Mama Shirley. The flowers are from my garden." "Mm-hmm." Marcus and Denise came shortly after. Darnell's younger brother and his wife. They seemed nervous, which was strange. They kept exchanging looks with each other, looks they thought I couldn't see. But I saw everything now. I had been blind for 14 years. I wasn't blind anymore. The kids ran around greeting everyone happy and oblivious. Jalen talking his uncle's ear off about basketball. Imani showing her grandmother the dance routine she'd learned in class. Normal. Everything looked normal, but underneath the surface the tension was building. I could feel it in the air, in the way Darnell kept checking his phone, in the way Marcus and Denise couldn't quite meet my eyes. At 6 o'clock exactly, the doorbell rang again. Darnell practically ran to answer it. I stayed in the kitchen finishing the gravy, listening to the sounds from the foyer. His voice, warm and familiar and lying. Her voice, laughing. A comfortable laugh, the kind of laugh you have with someone you've known for a long time, someone you're intimate with. I turned off the stove, wiped my hands on a dish towel, smoothed down my dress, and I walked out of my kitchen to meet the woman my husband was going to leave me for. She was beautiful. I'll give her that. Standing in my foyer in my house next to my husband, Brittany Wells, was undeniably beautiful. 29, maybe 30 years old. Light skin, the kind that glows even in bad lighting. Long, silky weave that probably cost more than my car payment. A designer dress that hugged every curve showed just enough to be memorable, but not enough to be inappropriate. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she was standing so close to Darnell that their arms were touching. His hand rested on the small of her back, guiding her into my home, the same way he used to touch me when we first started dating. "Monica, this is Brittany, my colleague I told you about." I walked toward them and I watched Brittany's face as I got closer. She was sizing me up, comparing herself to me, and in her eyes I could see that she had already decided she'd won. Poor thing. She didn't know she was walking into a trap. "Brittany." I extended my hand, kept my voice warm and welcoming. "So nice to finally meet you. Darnell's told me so much about you." She took my hand and her grip was firmer than I expected. Confident. This woman wasn't nervous at all. "Monica, finally. I feel like I already know you." She smiled, perfect white teeth, professionally applied lipstick. "Darnell talks about you all the time." She emphasized those last 3 words. All the time. Like it was an inside joke. Like she was letting me know that she knew things about my husband that I didn't. "Does he?" I kept smiling. "Well, please come in. Make yourself at home." And she did. That's the part that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. How comfortable she was in my house. How she walked through my rooms like she owned them. How she knew exactly where the bathroom was without asking. How she moved through the kitchen and found the wine glasses without a single wrong turn. She'd been here before while I was at work. While the kids were at school, my husband had been bringing his mistress into our home. I filed that information away with everything else. Another piece of evidence for later. Dinner started at 6:30. Everyone gathered around the table, and that's when I noticed where Brittany chose to sit, in my seat. For 14 years, I had sat in the same chair at that table. To Darnell's right, close enough to pass him dishes, to touch his arm, to share in the quiet intimacy of a married couple hosting their family. Brittany walked right up to that chair and sat down like it belonged to her. I watched my husband's face. He didn't say anything. Didn't suggest she move, just sat down in his own seat and let her stay right where she was. So I walked to the other end of the table, sat in the seat farthest from my husband, the seat usually reserved for guests, a guest in my own home. Mama Gloria caught my eye across the table. She raised one eyebrow just slightly. That one eyebrow said everything we couldn't say out loud. I nodded almost imperceptibly. "I see it, Mama. I see all of it." The food was served. Everyone started eating, started talking, started pretending this was a normal family dinner. But I wasn't eating. I was watching. I watched how Darnell leaned toward Brittany when she spoke, how his eyes lingered on her face when she laughed, how their hands occasionally brushed under the table when they thought no one was looking. I watched how she knew his drink order, how she knew what foods he didn't like, how she finished his sentences and shared stories about conferences they'd attended together. "Oh, Darnell, remember that conference in Miami?" Brittany giggled, actually giggled like a teenager with a crush. "Brittany, don't start," he laughed back, playful, flirtatious. "Miami. He'd told me that was a solo trip. 4 days business meetings couldn't be helped. I'd stayed home with the kids while he was apparently taking romantic vacations with another woman." "What happened in Miami?" Mama Shirley asked, completely oblivious. "I didn't know you had conferences there, Darnell." Brittany and Darnell exchanged a look, a secret look, the kind of look that made my stomach turn. "Just a work thing, Mama," Darnell said quickly. "Nothing exciting." Nothing exciting. Is that what he called it? I took a sip of my water and kept watching. That's when I noticed the bracelet. It was on Brittany's wrist, catching the light from the chandelier every time she moved her hand. A delicate tennis bracelet, diamonds, and white gold, elegant and expensive. I knew that bracelet. I knew it because I had stood in front of a Tiffany's window 3 months ago and pointed at it, told my husband it was beautiful, imagined how it would look on my wrist. I knew it because he had looked at the price tag, $4,800, and said, "Too expensive, maybe for your birthday." My birthday was 3 weeks ago. He gave me a gift card, $50, to Target. She got the bracelet he said we couldn't afford. The bracelet that was too expensive for his wife of 14 years, but somehow not too expensive for his 29-year-old mistress. I looked at that bracelet for a long moment. Then I looked at Darnell. He didn't notice. He was too busy laughing at something Brittany had said, but Mama Gloria noticed. She followed my gaze to the bracelet and I saw her jaw tighten, saw her knuckles go white around her fork. "That's a beautiful bracelet, Brittany," Mama said, her voice deceptively sweet. "A gift?" Brittany glanced at Darnell before answering. Just a flicker of a look, but I caught it. "Oh, just a little something I treated myself to. I believe in investing in yourself, you know." She didn't buy that bracelet. We both knew she didn't buy that bracelet. But I just smiled and nodded and filed another piece of evidence away. Around me, the dinner continued. Marcus and Denise were unnaturally quiet, pushing food around their plates. They knew something. That much was obvious now. Darnell's brother knew about Brittany, might have even helped cover for him. Another betrayal, another knife in my back, but I'd deal with that later. The kids were oblivious, thank God. Jalen was talking about basketball tryouts. Imani was telling Grandma Gloria about her dance recital. They didn't see what the adults saw. They didn't know their father was humiliating their mother right in front of them. Or so I thought. "Mommy!" Jalen's voice cut through the table conversation. He was looking at Brittany with a confused expression on his face. "Why is that lady touching Daddy's arm so much?" The whole table went silent. I looked at where Jalen was pointing. Brittany's hand was resting on Darnell's forearm, casual and possessive, like she had every right to be there. She pulled her hand back quickly, but the damage was done. A 13-year-old had noticed what the adults were pretending not to see. "She's just being friendly, son," Darnell said, his voice tight. "That's how people are at work." "But you never let Mommy's friends touch you like that." Mama Gloria covered her mouth, hiding what might have been a laugh. Mama Shirley looked confused. Marcus and Denise looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. And Brittany looked at me with something close to contempt in her eyes. Like I was the obstacle. Like I was the inconvenience standing between her and the life she wanted. "Eat your vegetables, baby," I said to Jalen, keeping my voice calm. "We can talk later." But I filed his observation away too. My 13-year-old son saw the truth. He'd be able to testify someday if it came to that. I hoped it wouldn't come to that, but I was preparing for everything now. Dessert was served, my famous pound cake, the one I'd spent years perfecting. Everyone praised it, said it was the best I'd ever made. And then Brittany opened her mouth. "This is amazing, Monica. You'll have to give me the recipe." She paused, smiled that poison smile. "For when I have my own family dinners." She looked at Darnell when she said it. My own family dinners. Like she was already planning them. Like this life, my life, was going to be hers someday soon. Darnell looked away, quickly, guiltily. And in that moment, I knew everything I needed to know. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a fling. He was planning to leave me. Planning to move her into my house, sit her at my table, let her raise my children. He was going to take everything I'd built and hand it to her. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. He thought I was just a wife, just a mother, just a woman who would cry and beg and eventually accept whatever scraps he decided to leave me. He didn't know that I had already found his secret accounts, already photographed every document, already started building the case that would destroy him. He didn't know that the woman smiling politely across the table was about to become his worst enemy. The dinner ended around 9 o'clock. Guests started leaving. Hugs and goodbyes and promises to do this again soon. Brittany was the last to go. She hugged Darnell first, held on a second too long, whispered something in his ear that made him smile. Then she turned to me. "Thank you for having me, Monica. You have such a beautiful home." She hugged me too, and as she did, she whispered something only I could hear. "He deserves to be happy." I felt my whole body go cold, but I didn't let her see it. I just smiled and said, "Drive safe, Brittany." And then she was gone. And my husband closed the door behind her like he hadn't just ripped my heart out and stomped on it. "That was nice," he said, turning to me with a smile. "We should do it more often." "We should," I agreed. "Now why don't you go get ready for bed? I'll clean up." He kissed me on the cheek, the same lips that had been whispering with his mistress all evening, and went upstairs. I stood in my kitchen surrounded by dirty dishes and empty wine glasses, and I let myself feel it for just one moment. The rage, the humiliation, The 14 years of love and sacrifice that he was treating like garbage. Then I pushed it down, because I had work to do. The kids were asleep, the house was quiet, and I had a forensic investigation to conduct. I had 3 weeks before that apartment lease started, 3 weeks before he planned to leave me with nothing. But I was going to make sure he was the one left with nothing instead. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and got to work. That night, I became someone I didn't recognize. Everyone thinks forensic accountants are boring people who stare at spreadsheets all day. And maybe that's true for some of us. But what people don't understand is that what we really do is hunt. We hunt for lies hidden in numbers. We hunt for theft disguised as transactions. We hunt for the truth that people try to bury under layers of deception. And now I was hunting my own husband. After everyone went to bed, I set up in the spare bedroom with my laptop, a printer, and every financial document I could find. I made coffee, knowing I wouldn't sleep that night. I put on my reading glasses, the ones Darnell always said made me look like a librarian, and I started tracing the money. First, the joint checking account. I went back 3 years transaction by transaction. I flagged every withdrawal I couldn't explain, every transfer that didn't make sense, every charge at a business I didn't recognize. The numbers started telling their story. 18 months ago, the unusual activity began. Small amounts at first, $100 here, $200 there. Cash withdrawals that Darnell said were for lunch with clients, or gas money. But the frequency increased, and the amounts grew. By 6 months ago, he was pulling $1,000, $2,000 at a time. Always cash. Always untraceable once it left the ATM. Over 18 months, he had taken more than $30,000 in cash from our joint account. $30,000 that I had earned, that I had deposited, that should have been building our children's future. Then I looked at the credit cards. We had 3 joint credit cards. I usually paid them off in full each month because I hated debt. But what I hadn't noticed, what I hadn't been paying attention to because I trusted my husband, was that the balances had been creeping up. Card 1, $8,000. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotels in our own city. A spa that I'd never visited. Card 2, $12,000. Electronics stores, high-end clothing boutiques, a place that looked like it sold designer handbags. Card 3, $4,800. One charge. Tiffany & Company, the bracelet. $24,800 in credit card debt, on cards with my name on them. Debt I would be responsible for if he left me. I kept digging. That secret joint account he had with Brittany. It was connected to a bank I'd never heard of, a small credit union across town where they'd opened an account together 8 months ago. I couldn't access the full statements yet, but I could see the balance from the one document I'd photographed from his briefcase. $47,000. $47,000 sitting in an account with his mistress's name on it. That was our emergency fund. That was the money I'd been saving for years, putting aside a few $100s each month, building a safety net for our family. He had taken it, all of it, and given it to her. But I wasn't done. I found a folder in his desk that he'd tried to hide under a stack of old magazines. Inside were receipts, credit card receipts, ATM receipts, receipts for things he thought I'd never see. A car lease, a BMW 3 Series, co-signed by Darnell James' primary driver Brittany Wells. He'd leased her a car, a $40,000 car, using his credit, which was actually my credit because I was the one who had rebuilt his score after his bankruptcy 10 years ago. A down payment receipt for a condominium. $15,000. Unit 714, some luxury building I'd seen advertised around town. He'd put a down payment on a condo, with our money, for her. The lease agreement I'd found on the kitchen table started making more sense now. They weren't just planning to live together. They were planning to buy together, to build together, using everything I had earned. I leaned back in my chair, surrounded by papers and documentation, and I let the full picture wash over me. Darnell James, my husband of 14 years, father of my 2 children, the man I had built a life with, sacrificed for, defended, to anyone who raised concerns. This man had stolen from me. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. Actually, literally stolen. Cash withdrawals $30,000. Credit card debt $24,800. Secret account transfer $47,000. Car lease $40,000 over the term. Condo down payment $15,000. Total over $150,000. This man had taken more than $150,000 from our family, from our children, from me. And he was planning to take more. He was planning to leave me with nothing while he started a new life with a woman half my age. I felt something fundamental shift inside me. For weeks I had been hurt, devastated, heartbroken. But now I was angry. The kind of anger that doesn't burn hot and fast and then fade away. The kind of anger that burns cold and slow and never, ever stops. I started organizing, making copies of everything, saving documents to 3 different cloud accounts, emailing backups to an account Darnell didn't know about, printing physical copies and putting them in a folder I would take to my mother's house. I photographed the receipts, the bank statements, the credit card bills. I created a spreadsheet because that's what accountants do, and I tracked every single dollar he had taken. By the time the sun came up, I had built a case that would destroy Darnell James in divorce court, a case that would prove he had dissipated marital assets, which is a fancy legal term for stealing from your spouse, a case that would show any judge in the country that this man deserved nothing, that he had already taken everything he would ever get. I heard him moving around upstairs, getting ready for another day of pretending to be a good husband, a good father, a good man. I closed my laptop, hid the papers, put on my robe and went downstairs to make breakfast like nothing had changed, because I couldn't let him know. Not yet. I needed a lawyer. I needed a plan. I needed to file before he did. And I needed to play the part of the happy, oblivious wife for just a little longer. So when he came downstairs and kissed me good morning, I smiled. "Good morning, baby. Did you sleep well?" "Like a rock. Last night was nice, wasn't it? Having everyone over." "It was perfect," I said. "We should do it again soon." He poured his coffee, grabbed his briefcase, and headed for the door. "See you tonight. Might be late, got a meeting." "Okay, baby. Have a good day." The door closed behind him. His car pulled out of the driveway, and I stood in my kitchen watching through the window until he disappeared around the corner. Then I picked up my phone and called my cousin Keisha. "Hey, girl," she answered, sounding tired. It was barely 7 in the morning. "What's going on?" "I need a divorce attorney. I need the best one. I need you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I've been waiting for this call for 5 years, Keisha said finally. "I just didn't think you'd ever make it." "I'm making it now. Can you meet me today?" "I'll clear my schedule. Come to my office at noon." "Keisha, one more thing." "What's that?" "He's been stealing from me, a lot. I have documentation for everything." Another pause, and when Keisha spoke again, I could hear the lawyer in her voice. Sharp, ready for battle. "Bring everything. We're going to bury him." I hung up the phone and looked around my kitchen. The same kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals for a man who didn't deserve them. The same kitchen where I had found the evidence of his betrayal. The same kitchen where I had smiled and pretended while my heart was shattering. This house was mine. I had paid for it with my grandmother's inheritance. I had paid every mortgage payment for 14 years. My name was on the deed. And no matter what Darnell thought he was going to take from me, he wasn't taking this. He thought he was the one with the power. He thought he was the one making the moves. He thought I was just going to lie down and let him destroy my life. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I am Monica James. I am a forensic accountant. I have found fraud that criminals thought was unfindable. I have traced money through shell companies and offshore accounts and layers of deception. And now I was going to use every single skill I had to take back what was mine. The game was about to change, and Darnell James was about to find out what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman. Keisha's law office was on the top floor of a building downtown. I'd been there plenty of times before for family events, for congratulating her on big wins, for just stopping by to say hello to my favorite cousin. But I'd never walked through those doors as a client. The receptionist smiled when she saw me. "Miss Monica, she's expecting you. Go on back." I walked down the hallway to Keisha's corner office. She was standing behind her desk when I entered, arms crossed, face serious. "Close the door." I did. "Sit down." I did that too. Keisha came around her desk and sat in the chair next to mine instead of behind the barrier of polished wood. That's when I noticed she wasn't alone. Two other women were in the room, sitting on the small couch by the window. Tanya, my best friend from college, now an HR director at a major corporation. She knew how to investigate people. And a woman I didn't recognize. Older, maybe late 50s, elegant and composed with silver-streaked locks pulled back from her face. "Monica, this is First Lady Robinson from Greater Emmanuel Baptist." I looked at Keisha, confused. "The pastor's wife. Why is she here?" First Lady Robinson stood and walked toward me. "Because I've been where you are, baby, 30 years ago. My first husband. And I wish someone had helped me the way I'm going to help you." She took my hand. Her grip was warm and strong. "Keisha called me this morning, told me what you're going through. I'm here because I know every woman in our church, every woman in this community, and I know things about your husband that you need to hear." I felt dizzy. "What things?" "Let's start at the beginning," Keisha interrupted. "Monica, I need you to show me everything, all the documents you found, all the evidence you've compiled." I opened my bag and pulled out the folder. 3 inches thick with bank statements, credit card records, receipts, photographs of documents, printed spreadsheets. Keisha took the folder and started spreading papers across her desk. Her face got more and more serious as she reviewed each page. "Jesus Christ, Monica. That bad? No." She looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she smiled. "That good. From a legal standpoint, this is beautiful. He handed you his head on a platter." Tanya leaned forward. "What are we looking at?" Keisha started breaking it down. "Cash withdrawals totaling over $30,000, credit card debt of almost $25,000, a secret joint account with the mistress holding $47,000 of Monica's savings, a car lease co-signed for the mistress, a condo down payment for the mistress." She held up the spreadsheet I'd created. "Total documented theft over $150,000. First Lady Robinson shook her head slowly. "Lord have mercy." "This isn't just infidelity," Keisha continued. "This is dissipation of marital assets. This is fraud. If I wanted to, I could refer this to the district attorney for criminal charges." Criminal charges. I hadn't thought about that. I just wanted out. I wanted him to leave me alone. I wanted to keep my house and my kids. "I'm not saying we should go that route, but it's leverage, serious leverage." Keisha came back to sit beside me. "Monica, whose name is on the house, both of ours, but the down payment came from my inheritance, $95,000 from my grandmother. And the mortgage payments, all me, auto pay from my personal account, 14 years. What about his income? It went into a joint account, but..." I paused, remembering all those years of paying everything. "I can't remember the last time his paycheck actually covered a bill. He was always behind on deposits, always had money tied up somewhere else." Keisha nodded, making notes. "So you contributed your inheritance. You paid the mortgage, you paid the bills. What exactly did he contribute?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "He mowed the lawn sometimes, fixed things around the house when they broke, watched the kids when I had to work late." I felt my voice getting smaller. "That's about it." "That's called being a spouse," Tanya said dryly. "That's not financial contribution." "The house," Keisha said firmly, "is yours. The down payment was your separate property from inheritance. You maintained it exclusively with your income. His name might be on the deed, but I can argue successfully that this house belongs to you." "What about the money he took?" "He has to pay it back. Every cent. That $47,000 in the account with his mistress, we're freezing that immediately. The car lease, his responsibility. The condo down payment coming out of his hide." First Lady Robinson spoke up. "There's something else you need to know, Monica." I turned to look at her. This isn't the first time. My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "The woman at that dinner, Brittany. She's not his first. There have been others over the years. Women from the church, women from his job, women he met, wherever men like him meet women." "How do you know this?" Because women talk to me. They come to me when they can't go to their pastor, when they're ashamed, when they need someone who understands. First Lady Robinson's eyes were sad. I've heard your husband's name more times than I can count. I just couldn't tell you. It wasn't my place until you were ready to hear it. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. All those years, all those signs I'd ignored, all those times I'd told myself I was being paranoid. I hadn't been paranoid, I'd been right. I'd always been right. How many, First Lady Robinson hesitated. How many women? At least 4 that I know of, possibly more. 4. At least 4 women before Brittany. 4 women he'd cheated with while I was working 12-hour days, paying his bills, raising his children, being the perfect wife. Keisha put her hand on my arm. Monica, I know this is a lot, but this information helps us. It establishes a pattern. It shows the court that this wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This is who he is. I was quiet for a long moment, processing, grieving the last remnants of the marriage I thought I had. Then I took a deep breath. What do we do now? Keisha smiled. That shark smile that made her one of the most feared divorce attorneys in the state. Now we go to war. She started laying out the plan. Step 1, protect the assets. I would go to the bank that afternoon and separate the joint accounts. Move every dollar I could into an account in my name only. Step 2, document everything. Tanya would use her HR skills to help me investigate Brittany. Where she worked, how long she'd known Darnell, whether she'd received any of the money in a way that could be traced. Step 3. Hire a private investigator. Keisha had someone on retainer, a former police detective who specialized in infidelity cases. He would follow Darnell and Brittany, photograph them together, build a visual record of their affair. Step 4. File first. In divorce, whoever files first controls the narrative. Darnell thought he had time. He thought I didn't know anything. We would use that against him. I'm going to file the petition tomorrow, Keisha said. I'll request an emergency hearing based on the dissipation of assets. We'll get a court order freezing his accounts, preventing him from transferring any more money. What about the house? You're staying in the house. We'll file for exclusive use of the marital residence. Based on his financial misconduct, any judge in this county will grant it. And the kids? Full custody. He can have visitation, but based on his behavior, we'll argue that you should be the primary custodian. Jalen and Amani need stability. Their father's about to have none. I looked around the room at these 3 women. My cousin fighting for me. My best friend ready to investigate. A church leader lending her wisdom and her network. Why are you all doing this? I know Keisha's family, but Tanya, First Lady Robinson. Why? Tanya answered first. Because I love you, Monica. I've watched you pour yourself out for that man for 14 years, and I've been waiting for you to see what everyone else saw. First Lady Robinson nodded. And because this is what we do, women like us. We catch each other when we fall. We lift each other when the men try to push us down. We build each other back up when the world tries to break us. She squeezed my hand. You're not alone, baby. You never were. You just couldn't see us through all the pain. But we're here now, and we're not going anywhere. I felt tears threatening, but I pushed them back. I'd cried enough. It was time to fight. Okay, I said. Let's do this. Keisha stood up all business. First, stop the bank. You're going to separate those accounts today before he has any idea what's coming. We left the office together, 4 women with a mission. Darnell James thought he was about to take everything from me. He had no idea that everything was about to be taken from him. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the same Monica I'd always been. Good morning kisses, dinner on the table, asking about his day, pretending I believed every lie that came out of his mouth. Underneath, I was systematically building the case that would end him. The private investigator Keisha hired was named Ray, former Chicago PD, 20 years on the force, retired and now making twice his old salary catching cheating spouses. He was short, unremarkable looking, the kind of man you'd never notice in a crowd, perfect for surveillance. Your husband and Miss Wells meet every Tuesday and Thursday evening, Ray reported during our first update meeting. Usually at her apartment, sometimes at a restaurant in the business district. They're not subtle about it. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs. Darnell and Brittany walking into her apartment building, his hand on her waist. Darnell and Brittany at dinner leaning across the table toward each other. Darnell and Brittany kissing in a parking garage, his car visible in the background. Darnell and Brittany at the condo he'd put a down payment on, meeting with what looked like a real estate agent. They visited the condo 3 times this week, Ray continued. Looks like they're picking out finishes, countertops, flooring, that sort of thing. They were decorating. While I was working and cooking and taking care of our children, they were picking out countertops for the love nest he was building with my money. I stared at the photos until my eyes burned. You okay? Tanya asked quietly. I'm fine. I closed the folder. This is good. This is exactly what we need. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But the hurt was being transformed into something else now, into fuel, into focus. Every photograph was a nail in his coffin, and I was going to make sure he was buried deep. Tanya had done her own investigating. Using her HR network and some creative database searches, she'd built a profile on Brittany Wells. She's been at his company for 18 months, Tanya reported. Transferred from the Dallas office. Before that, she was at another pharmaceutical company where, interestingly, she also had a relationship with a married manager. She has a history of this. Looks that way. The manager in Dallas. His wife found out and he got fired. Brittany transferred before any disciplinary action could touch her. So, Brittany wasn't just a homewrecker. She was a professional homewrecker, a woman who made a habit of targeting married men in positions to benefit her career. There's more, Tanya said. I looked into her finances. She makes $62,000 a year. Good salary, but not enough to afford that apartment she lives in, or the car she drives, or the clothes she wears. She's living off married men. Specifically, she's living off your husband, who's living off you. I almost laughed, the absurdity of it. This woman thought she'd found a successful man, a provider, someone who could give her the life she wanted. Instead, she'd found a man who couldn't even provide for himself without his wife's money. When the truth came out when Darnell's house of cards collapsed, Brittany was going to realize she'd bet on the wrong horse. But that was her problem, not mine. While Ray was watching and Tanya was researching, I was playing the hardest role of my life, the oblivious wife. Every night when Darnell came home smelling like Brittany's perfume, I smiled and asked about his day. Every time he lied about where he'd been, I nodded and said I understood how demanding his job was. Every morning when he kissed me goodbye before going to meet his mistress, I told him I loved him. And inside, I felt nothing. The love had died. The hurt had transformed. All that was left was cold, calculated patience. The kids noticed something was different. Jalen started watching his father more closely, that protective instinct kicking in. Imani asked me one night if I was sad, and I had to lie to my own daughter. Mama's just tired, baby. Work has been busy. But I made them a silent promise. When this was over, when the truth came out, I would make sure they understood. I would make sure they knew that their mother had fought for them, protected them, refused to let their father's betrayal destroy their lives. On day 10, I found something that changed everything. Darnell left his briefcase at home. He never left his briefcase at home. It went everywhere with him like it contained state secrets. Maybe it did. I waited until his car was out of the driveway before I opened it. Inside, underneath a stack of sales reports, was a manila folder I'd never seen before. I pulled it out and felt my heart stop. Divorce petition. Plaintiff, Darnell Marcus James. Defendant, Monica Lynn James. He'd already had papers drawn up. He was planning to serve me. And not just that. I read through the petition, my forensic accountant brain catching every detail. Grounds for divorce, irreconcilable differences, emotional neglect, failure to support the marriage. He was blaming me. He was going to tell a court that I had neglected him, that I had driven him away, that the failure of our marriage was my fault. But the worst part was the demands. He wanted 50% of all marital assets. He wanted the house sold and proceeds split. He wanted joint custody of the children. He wanted me to pay him spousal support. I read that line 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Spousal support. This man, who hadn't consistently contributed to our household in 10 years, wanted me to pay him after we divorced. This man, who had stolen over $150,000, wanted half of everything else. This man, who had cheated with at least 5 women, wanted joint custody of the children who barely knew him because he was never home. The audacity, the absolute shameless audacity. I photographed every page of that petition, sent it to Keisha immediately. Then I put everything back exactly where I'd found it and closed the briefcase like I'd never touched it. My phone rang 10 minutes later. "Monica!" Keisha's voice was tight with controlled rage. "I just saw what you sent me. He's going to try to take everything. He's going to try. He's going to fail." I could hear her typing furiously. "This is actually perfect. He was going to file, but now we have his strategy. We know exactly what he's planning. We can counter every single move before he makes it." "When do we file?" "Tomorrow. We file tomorrow before he even knows what hit him." I hung up the phone and looked around my kitchen. This kitchen in my house that he thought he was going to take from me. This home I had paid for, maintained, filled with love and family and sacrifice. No, he wasn't taking anything. I was. The next morning, Keisha filed the divorce petition on my behalf in family court. We also filed an emergency motion based on the dissipation of marital assets, requesting an immediate freeze on all accounts connected to Darnell. The court granted the motion within hours. By noon, every bank account Darnell had access to was frozen. The secret account with Brittany, his personal checking, even his work expense account, which we discovered he'd been using for personal purchases. By 2 o'clock, a process server found Darnell at his office and handed him the divorce papers. And by 6 o'clock, when Darnell came storming into the house, I was ready. "What did you do?" He was screaming before he even got through the door. "Monica, what the hell did you do?" I was sitting calmly at the kitchen table folder of evidence in front of me, the same folder I'd compiled that night after the dinner, now much thicker with Ray's photographs and Tanya's research. "Sit down, Darnell." "I will not sit down. You froze my accounts. You filed for divorce without even talking to me." "Talking?" I laughed, actually laughed. "Like you talked to me before you opened a secret account with Brittany. Like you talked to me before you put a down payment on a condo for her. Like you talked to me before you drafted your own divorce papers that I found in your briefcase." He went white, absolutely white. How did you? "I'm a forensic accountant, Darnell. I find hidden money for a living. Did you really think I wouldn't find yours?" I opened the folder and started spreading documents across the table. $30,000 in cash withdrawals over 18 months. $25,000 in credit card debt on cards with my name on them. $47,000 transferred to your joint account with your mistress. A car lease for a BMW that she drives. $15,000 down payment on a condo you were going to share with her. Each number landed like a punch. I watched his face cycle through emotions. Shock, fear, anger, and finally desperation. "Monica, I can explain." "No, you can't. There's nothing to explain. You stole from me, from your children, from your family, and you were going to leave us with nothing while you started a new life with that woman." "She doesn't mean anything to me." "She means $47,000, apparently. That's a lot of nothing." He tried a different approach, softening his voice, reaching for my hand. "Baby, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll end it with Brittany. I swear." I pulled my hand away. "You were going to serve me with divorce papers, Darnell. I saw them. You were going to claim I was emotionally neglectful. You were going to ask me to pay you spousal support." His mask slipped completely. "Those papers weren't—" "I was just exploring options." "You were exploring options for how to take everything from me. Well, now I'm exploring options for how to take everything from you." I stood up and gathered my papers. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow you're going to pack a bag and leave this house. Our attorneys will handle everything from here." "You can't kick me out of my own house." "It's not your house. The down payment was my inheritance. The mortgage payments are from my account. Your name might be on the deed, but every dollar in these walls is mine. And when this goes to court, the judge is going to agree with me." I walked past him toward the stairs. "Monica, wait." I stopped but didn't turn around. Please, I'm sorry. I made mistakes. But 14 years? Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything to me, Darnell. Everything. And you threw it away for a woman in a designer dress and a borrowed BMW. So, no. You don't get to ask what our marriage means. You killed it. I'm just burying the body. I went upstairs and locked the bedroom door behind me. Through the door, I could hear him calling Brittany. Panicking, trying to figure out what to do. Good. Let him panic. The game had changed, and Darnell James was finally realizing that he'd never been the smartest person in this marriage. That honor belonged to me. The next week was chaos. Darnell refused to leave the house at first. He planted himself in the guest room and insisted he wasn't going anywhere. So Keisha filed another motion, this one for exclusive use of the marital residence based on his documented financial misconduct and the threat it posed to me and the children. The judge granted it in 48 hours. A sheriff's deputy showed up at our door with an order requiring Darnell to vacate within 24 hours. I stood in the doorway and watched as the reality finally hit him. He was losing. For all his scheming, all his planning, all his confidence that he was going to outsmart me, he was losing. "This isn't over, Monica," he said as he threw clothes into a suitcase. "I'm going to fight this. I'm going to take you to court and expose you for who you really are." I welcome the opportunity. He looked at me with such hatred in that moment. Pure, undiluted hatred. This man who had promised to love me forever now looked at me like I was his enemy. Maybe I was. Maybe I had always been his enemy in his mind. Just a source of money, a stepping stone, someone to use until someone better came along. "The kids will know the truth," he threatened. "I'll tell them everything about their precious mother." "Go ahead. Tell them how you stole their college fund. Tell them how you bought another woman a car with money that should have been paying for their futures. Tell them how you brought your mistress to our family dinner and made her sit in your wife's chair." I stepped closer, getting in his face. "Tell them everything, Darnell, because I have documentation for all of it. And when they're old enough to understand, they're going to see exactly who their father really is." He grabbed his bags and stormed out. The door slammed so hard the pictures on the wall shook. I watched through the window as he loaded his car and drove away. Probably to Brittany's apartment, to the woman who thought she'd won the prize. What neither of them realized yet was that there was no prize. There was just a man who couldn't take care of himself, who had spent his whole life living off women, who was about to face the consequences of his choices for the first time. But I couldn't celebrate yet. The hardest part was still coming. That night, I sat the kids down in the living room. Jalen was 13, old enough to have noticed things, old enough to have his suspicions. He sat on the couch with his arms crossed, already defensive. Imani was 10. Still young enough to believe in fairy tales. Still young enough to be devastated when those fairy tales turned out to be lies. "I need to tell you both something," I started, "about me and your father." "You're getting divorced," Jalen said flatly. "How did you know?" "I'm not stupid, Mom. I heard the yelling. I saw the police officer at the door. And Dad's been lying about stuff for a long time. I just didn't want to say anything." My heart broke for my son. 13 years old and already world-weary, already knowing that adults couldn't be trusted. Imani's eyes were filling with tears. "Is Daddy coming back?" "Daddy isn't going to live here anymore, baby. But he's still your daddy. He still loves you. That part won't change." I wasn't sure that last part was true. I wasn't sure Darnell loved anyone but himself. But I couldn't tell my children that. They'd learn in their own time. They'd see with their own eyes. "Is it because of that lady?" Jalen asked. "The one from the dinner." I hesitated. How much should I tell them they were children? They didn't need to know all the ugly details. "Your father made some choices that hurt our family," I said carefully. "And those choices mean that we can't be married anymore. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault. And I'm going to make sure you're both okay. That's my job. That's what I'm going to focus on." Imani crawled into my lap, crying into my shoulder. I held her and stroked her hair, feeling my own tears trying to escape. But I didn't cry. I couldn't. I had to be strong for them. Jalen watched us for a moment. Then he came over and put his arms around both of us. "It's going to be okay, Mom. We've got you." 13 years old, taking care of his mother because his father wouldn't. I made another silent promise in that moment. When this was all over, when the dust had settled, I was going to make sure my children knew what a real family looked like, what real love looked like, what a real man was supposed to be. They were going to break the cycle. I would make sure of it. The weeks between Darnell leaving and our court date were filled with preparation. Keisha and I met almost every day building our case, anticipating every possible argument Darnell's attorney might make. He'd hired a cheap lawyer, some guy from a discount firm who specialized in volume, not quality. I could see Keisha's contempt every time his name came up. "They're going to argue that the house should be sold and proceeds split," Keisha predicted. "They're going to claim Darnell contributed equally to the marriage, just not in financial ways. Emotional support, childcare, household management." "He didn't do any of those things either." "I know, but they'll try. That's what they do when they have nothing else." Ray continued his surveillance documenting Darnell's ongoing relationship with Brittany. Every photograph was more evidence of his lies, his disrespect, his complete disregard for the family he was supposedly fighting for. One photograph stood out. It showed Darnell and Brittany at the condo that was supposed to be theirs. They were standing in the empty living room, arms around each other, clearly celebrating something. He had given her a ring. Not an engagement ring, but a ring nonetheless. A diamond ring on her right hand, probably to keep her happy while the divorce played out. I wondered if Brittany knew that the accounts were frozen, that the money he'd promised her was no longer accessible, that her meal ticket had stopped producing. If she didn't know yet, she would soon. Church was difficult during this time. Word had gotten around the way it always does in church communities. The whispers started as soon as I walked through the door, some sympathetic, some judgmental, some just hungry for gossip. The pastor tried to talk to me after service one Sunday. "Sister Monica, I've heard about your situation. Have you considered reconciliation marriage counseling? The Lord hates divorce." I looked at this man who had preached sermons about faithfulness while my husband was cheating under his roof. This man who had shaken Darnell's hand every Sunday while Darnell was stealing from his family. "Pastor, my husband stole over $150,000 from our family. He's been having affairs for years. He brought his mistress to our family dinner. And you want me to consider reconciliation?" The pastor blinked. "I wasn't aware of the specifics." "Nobody ever is. Nobody wants to know the specifics. They just want women to stay quiet, stay married, stay suffering. Well, I'm done suffering. And if the Lord hates divorce, maybe the Lord should have said something to my husband before he destroyed everything." I walked away before he could respond. But I wasn't alone. First Lady Robinson appeared at my side, slipping her arm through mine. "Told him, did you? I shouldn't have said that. In church." "Child, please. That man needed to hear it. They all need to hear it." She patted my arm. "Don't you worry about what anyone in this church thinks. Worry about you and those babies. That's all that matters." Mate. She walked me to my car, and before I could get in, she said something that stayed with me. "When this is over, when you've won, and you will win, I want you to remember something. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for every woman who's been told to stay quiet, to be patient, to forgive and forget while men walk all over them. You're showing them it's possible to fight back and win. That matters. Don't ever forget that it matters." I carried those words with me all the way to court. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 5. Not because I needed to, but because I couldn't sleep anymore. I put on my best professional outfit, did my makeup carefully, made sure every hair was in place. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I almost didn't recognize. Not a victim, not a doormat, not a woman who was going to beg for scraps. I saw a warrior. Keisha picked me up at 8. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for 14 years. I just didn't know it." She smiled and handed me coffee. "Then let's go show that man what happens when he underestimates the wrong woman." We drove to the courthouse in silence, both of us focused on the battle ahead. Today, everything changed. Today, I took my life back. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, an American flag hanging behind the judge's bench. A place where families came apart and lives changed forever, all under those humming fluorescent tubes. I arrived first with Keisha. We set up at the plaintiff's table, spreading out our evidence in neat stacks. 3 inches of documentation. Every dollar traced. Every lie cataloged. Darnell arrived 10 minutes late, looking disheveled. His suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. He was accompanied by his discount attorney, a man named Harold something, who carried a single thin folder and looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Brittany was there too, in the gallery, sitting in the back row with her arms crossed and her face pinched. She looked different than she had at my dinner table, smaller somehow, less confident. Maybe she had finally realized what she'd actually won. The judge entered. Judge Patricia Williams, a black woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. I'd researched her. 20 years on the bench, known for being fair, thorough, and having zero tolerance for games. Perfect. Good morning, everyone. We're here on the matter of James versus James petition for divorce emergency motions regarding asset distribution and custody. Is everyone present and represented? Keisha stood. Keisha Washington for the petitioner, Monica James. My client is present. Harold struggled to his feet. Harold Timms for the respondent, Darnell James. He's here. Judge Williams reviewed her notes. I've read the filings. This appears to be a case involving significant allegations of financial misconduct. Mrs. Washington, why don't you begin by walking me through your client's position? Keisha stood and began her opening. Calm, professional, devastating. Your Honor, my client, Monica James, was married to Darnell James for 14 years. During that time, she worked as a senior forensic accountant, earning approximately $125,000 annually. She used an inheritance of $95,000 from her grandmother as a down payment on the family home. She paid 100% of the mortgage payments for the entire marriage. She was the primary financial provider for the household, including paying all utilities, groceries, children's expenses, and maintaining the family vehicles. She paused, letting that sink in. Mr. James, during this same period, contributed minimally to the household finances. His income was supposedly $95,000 annually, but forensic analysis of financial records shows that very little of this money went toward household expenses. Keisha walked toward the evidence table. Instead, Mr. James systematically diverted marital assets for his own purposes. Over the past 18 months, he withdrew over $30,000 in cash from joint accounts without his wife's knowledge. He accumulated credit card debt exceeding $24,000 on cards bearing both parties' names. He transferred $47,000 from a joint savings account to a secret account he opened with his mistress, Brittany Wells. I heard a gasp from the gallery. Brittany, probably. Additionally, Mr. James co-signed a car lease for Miss Wells totaling approximately $40,000 over the lease term. He placed a $15,000 down payment on a condominium in Miss Wells' name, and he purchased at least $4,800 in jewelry for Miss Wells using marital funds. Keisha returned to our table and picked up the stack of bank statements. Your Honor, this isn't speculation. This is documented financial fraud. Every transaction is traced. Every transfer is recorded. Mr. James didn't just cheat on his wife. He stole from her. He stole from his children. And he was planning to leave his family with nothing while he started a new life with the proceeds of his theft. She set down the bank statements and picked up another folder. We have photographs documenting Mr. James's ongoing relationship with Miss Wells. We have evidence of the condo purchase, the car lease, the secret account. And we have the draft divorce petition that Mr. James had prepared in which he planned to claim his wife was emotionally neglectful and request spousal support from her. Judge Williams's eyebrows rose at that last part. Mr. James believed he would take half of everything his wife built, including the home her grandmother's inheritance paid for. He believed he would walk away from this marriage enriched by his wife's labor while she struggled to rebuild. We are here today to ensure that doesn't happen. Keisha sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Williams turned to the other table. Mr. Timms, your response. Harold Timms stood slowly, clearly uncomfortable. He glanced at Darnell, who was staring at the table, then back at the judge. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that there have been difficulties in the marriage. He acknowledges that some financial decisions were made without proper communication with his spouse. However, we would argue that these were not acts of theft, but rather poor judgment during a time of marital strife. Poor judgment totaling over $150,000, Judge Williams asked. Well, when you phrase it that way. I'm not phrasing anything, Mr. Timms. I'm adding up the numbers presented in the filings. Continue. Harold cleared his throat. My client contributed to this marriage in non-financial ways. He was present for the children. He maintained the home. He provided emotional support during his wife's demanding career. We would argue that marriage is a partnership and both parties' contributions should be valued equally regardless of financial input. Keisha was on her feet. Objection. If Mr. James was such an involved parent and household manager, why do the children's school records show that Mrs. James attended every parent-teacher conference, every school event, every doctor's appointment? Why do household receipts show that Mrs. James purchased all groceries, all household supplies, all children's necessities? I haven't heard a question, Harold protested weakly. The question is this, Keisha pressed. What exactly did Mr. James contribute? Because we have documentation for everything Mrs. James did. We'd love to see documentation for Mr. James's alleged contributions. Silence. Judge Williams made a note. Let's move on to testimony. Mrs. James, please take the stand. I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. Mrs. James, Keisha began gently. How long were you married to Darnell James? 14 years. During that time, did you work outside the home? Yes, I'm a senior forensic accountant. I've worked at my company for 12 years. And your husband, did he work? He was employed as a regional sales manager, but I paused. In terms of actually contributing to our household, I can count on one hand the number of bills he consistently paid. Can you describe the financial arrangement in your marriage? My paycheck went into our joint account. I paid the mortgage, utilities, groceries, car payments, insurance, the children's expenses, everything. I assumed Darnell's income was going into savings or investments. He said he was handling that. When did you discover he was not in fact handling that? 2 weeks before he brought his mistress to our family dinner. There was a stir in the courtroom. Judge Williams looked up. I found discrepancies in our accounts. Large cash withdrawals I hadn't authorized. Credit card charges I hadn't made. I started investigating using the same skills I use in my job, and I discovered that my husband had been systematically draining our finances for at least 18 months. What did you discover? I discovered a secret bank account in his name and Brittany Wells's name containing $47,000 of our savings. I discovered he had been paying for her apartment, her car, her lifestyle. I discovered he had put a down payment on a condominium for them to share. I discovered he had purchased expensive jewelry for her while telling me we couldn't afford luxuries. How did you feel when you discovered this? I took a breath. Betrayed, devastated, and then angry. I gave this man 14 years of my life. I paid for his lifestyle. I funded his failed businesses. I was a good wife, a good mother, a good provider. And he was planning to leave me with nothing. One final question, Mrs. James. In your expert opinion as a forensic accountant, was this theft? Harold jumped up. Objection. Calls for a legal conclusion. I'll allow it, Judge Williams said. The witness has relevant expertise. I looked directly at Darnell for the first time since taking the stand. Yes, in my professional opinion, this was theft. Systematic premeditated theft from a marital estate. If this were a corporate case, the perpetrator would face criminal charges. The only difference here is that the victim was his wife. Keisha sat down. No further questions. Harold's cross-examination was painful to watch. He tried to suggest I was exaggerating that the money was for legitimate purposes, that Darnell had intended to invest it for the family's benefit. I answered every question calmly, factually, pointing to specific documents when challenged. By the time I stepped down, Harold looked defeated. Darnell took the stand next. His testimony was a disaster. He tried to claim the money was for investments that hadn't worked out. When asked for documentation, he had none. He tried to claim Brittany was just a friend. When confronted with photographs, he stammered and contradicted himself. He tried to claim he had been a devoted father. When asked the names of his children's teachers, doctors, or friends, he couldn't answer. And when Keisha asked him directly if he had transferred $47,000 to an account with his mistress, he finally broke. Fine. Yes. Yes, I did, but she was going to be my wife. I was planning a future. A future funded by money you stole from your current wife. I didn't steal anything. I was going to pay it back. When, after you divorced Mrs. James and took half her house, Darnell's face twisted with rage. That house should have been half mine anyway. I lived there for 14 years, but you didn't pay for it. I contributed in other ways. What ways specifically? What did you contribute? Silence, Mr. James. I was there. I was present. I was a husband and a father. You were physically present in a house your wife paid for while conducting an affair and stealing her money. Is that your definition of contribution? Objection. Harold's voice was weak. Withdrawn. No further questions. Judge Williams called for closing arguments. Keisha was brief and devastating. She summarized the evidence, highlighted Darnell's admissions, and requested the court award me the house full custody and restitution for the stolen funds. Harold's closing was a desperate plea for mercy, arguing that Darnell had already suffered enough that breaking up a family would hurt the children, that surely some compromise could be reached. Judge Williams listened to both sides, then took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. I've seen many divorces in my years on this bench. This one stands out as particularly egregious. She looked at Darnell. Mr. James, you systematically defrauded your wife and family. You diverted marital assets to fund a relationship with another woman. You accumulated debt in your wife's name. You planned to divorce her while demanding support from her. The audacity is remarkable. She looked at me. Mrs. James, you have conducted yourself with dignity throughout these proceedings. You have provided clear documentation of your contributions and your husband's misconduct. The court appreciates your professionalism. She put her glasses back on and read from her notes. Here is my ruling. The marital home is awarded solely to Monica James. The down payment was her separate property, and she maintained the mortgage exclusively. Mr. James's name will be removed from the deed. I felt tears threatening, but held them back. Custody of both minor children is awarded to Monica James. Mr. James may have supervised visitation every other weekend, but given his demonstrated priorities, I have concerns about his fitness as a primary custodian. Darnell made a sound of protest, but his lawyer silenced him. Mr. James is ordered to repay all dissipated marital assets. The $47,000 transferred to the account with Miss Wells, the $15,000 down payment on the condominium, the credit card debt accumulated without Mrs. James's consent. Total restitution approximately $87,000. I heard Brittany gasp in the gallery. Additionally, Mr. James is ordered to pay child support in the amount of $2,400 per month until both children reach 18. He is also ordered to pay spousal support of $1,500 per month for a period of 5 years. Darnell jumped up. That's almost $4,000 a month. I can't afford that. Perhaps you should have considered that before you spent your wife's money on your mistress, Mr. James. Sit down. He sat. Finally, the court is referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal investigation. The systematic nature of the financial misconduct suggests this may rise to the level of theft and fraud. Criminal charges. I hadn't expected that. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. It was over. Or rather, it was finally beginning. Outside the courthouse, my sister circle was waiting. Mama Gloria, Tanya, First Lady Robinson, even Ray, the private investigator who had become oddly invested in seeing this through. When Keisha and I pushed through the doors into the afternoon sunlight, they erupted. Baby girl! Mama Gloria reached me first, pulling me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. You did it. You really did it. We did it, I said. I couldn't have done this alone. Tanya was crying, which made me start crying too. That man's face when the judge mentioned criminal charges. I wish I had a picture. First Lady Robinson stood back watching with that serene smile she always wore. When I caught her eye, she nodded slightly. "Well done," that nod said. "You showed them all." Keisha was already on the phone with someone probably filing additional motions while the victory was still fresh. That woman never stopped working. "What happens now?" I asked when she hung up. "Now? Now you go home, to your house, and you start rebuilding your life." She squeezed my arm. "The hard part's over, Monica. Everything from here is just details." But before I could go home, there was one more scene I hadn't anticipated. Brittany Wells was standing by a car in the parking lot, alone, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold even though it was 70 degrees outside. She saw me coming and flinched. Part of me wanted to walk past. She wasn't worth my time. She had known what she was doing when she started sleeping with a married man. She had made her choices and now she was living with the consequences. But another part of me, a petty part I wasn't proud of, wanted her to know exactly what she had lost. I walked over. "Monica, She stopped clearly, not sure what to say. "You thought you were getting a successful man," I said calmly. "A provider, someone who was going to take care of you. Instead, you got a man who can't take care of himself, who never could, who was living off me the entire time he was promising you a future." She flinched again. "That money you thought was his, mine. That house you thought you'd be moving into, mine. That lifestyle you thought you were signing up for, it doesn't exist. It never existed. It was all funded by the wife you were trying to replace." "I didn't know." "You knew he was married. You knew he had children. You knew exactly what you were doing when you sat in my seat at my dinner table and called yourself his friend." I leaned closer. "You were never going to be his wife, Brittany. You were just the next woman he was using. And now that the money's gone, now that he has to pay me every month instead of paying for you, how long do you think he's going to stick around?" She had no answer. "Good luck," I said. "You're going to need it." I walked away without looking back. Was it petty? Yes. Did it feel good? Absolutely. Some people deserve kindness and grace. Some people deserve to understand exactly what their choices cost them. I got in my car and drove home. To my house. My house. The kids were at Mama Gloria's, so the place was quiet when I arrived. I walked through every room, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs on the shelves. 14 years of memories, some good, some terrible, all of them mine now. I ended up in the kitchen, standing at the sink, looking out at the backyard. This was where I had cooked thousands of meals for a man who didn't appreciate them, where I had hosted family dinners, including the one where he'd brought his mistress, where I had found the evidence that changed everything. And now, it was just mine. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion, and sat down at the kitchen table. For the first time in months, I let myself feel everything. The grief for the marriage I thought I had. The relief that it was finally over. The fear of what came next. The hope that it might actually be better. I cried, really cried the ugly kind with snot and shaking shoulders and sounds I didn't know I could make. Then I stopped. I wiped my face, finished my wine, and started planning. Life wasn't over. It was just different now. The months after the court ruling were a process of rebuilding. Darnell's name came off the deed to the house. His belongings were boxed up and sent to whatever apartment he'd managed to rent with his much reduced income. The locks were changed, the security system updated, everything that had connected him to my home systematically removed. The child support and spousal support started coming. Some months on time, some months late with excuses. I documented everything, prepared to go back to court if needed. Keisha kept the pressure on filing motions whenever he missed a payment. His financial situation deteriorated rapidly. The district attorney declined to press criminal charges, citing the complexity of marital finance cases, but the investigation had rattled him. Brittany left him within 2 months of the ruling, apparently having found a new married man with deeper pockets. Last I heard, Darnell was living in a studio apartment, working the same job, but barely making ends meet after the support payments. His mother wouldn't take him in because she couldn't afford another mouth to feed. His brother Marcus, whose wife Denise had finally gotten the courage to leave him too after watching my case, wasn't speaking to him. He had built his life on using women. Now he had no women left to use. I can't say I felt sorry for him. I tried sometimes to summon some compassion for the father of my children, but then I would remember that bracelet, that dinner, that smug confidence that he was going to take everything from me. No, he got exactly what he deserved. The kids adjusted better than I expected. Jalen threw himself into school and basketball, channeling whatever anger he felt into productivity. He told me once that he was proud of me, that watching me fight for our family had taught him what strength really looked like. My son, learning to be a man by watching his mother instead of his father. Imani struggled more at first. She missed her daddy, missed the family unit that had been however dysfunctional. We did therapy together and separately working through the betrayal and the loss. One day, about 6 months after everything was finalized, she came to me with a school project. We had to write about a hero, she said, someone we admire. I prepared myself to hear about some pop star or athlete. I wrote about you, Mom. I read her paper. It was about a woman who had been knocked down but refused to stay down. A woman who had used her brain and her courage to protect her family. A woman who had shown her daughter that women don't have to accept being treated badly. I cried again. The good kind this time. Work became easier now that I wasn't carrying the weight of a dying marriage. I got a promotion, Director of Forensic Accounting, the first Black woman to hold the position at my company. At my celebration dinner surrounded by Mama Gloria and my sister circle and my beautiful, resilient children, I thought about how far I had come. A year ago, I had been a woman disappearing into her husband's shadow. Now, I was stepping into my own light. Church changed too. I still went, but differently. I no longer sat in the back head down, hoping no one would notice me. I sat wherever I wanted, talked to whoever I wanted, refused to shrink myself to make others comfortable. The pastor eventually apologized for his initial response to my situation. I accepted the apology but didn't forget the lesson. The church could be a source of support, but it could also be a place that pressured women to stay in bad situations. I made it my mission to be the person First Lady Robinson had been for me, a safe place for women who needed to know there was another way. And eventually, almost a year after my divorce was finalized, there was someone new. His name was David. A lawyer, believe it or not, though not a divorce attorney. Corporate law. We met at a charity function, got to talking about the complexities of forensic accounting, and before I knew it, we'd been standing in the corner talking for 3 hours. He asked for my number. I gave it to him. Our first date was coffee. Our second was dinner. Our third was a walk through the botanical garden downtown, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's rhythms. He was patient with me, understanding when I needed to take things slow, never pushing, never demanding, just consistently showing up. I'm not looking for someone to take care of me, I told him on our 4th date. I did that for 14 years. I can take care of myself. Good, he said. I'm looking for a partner, someone to walk beside, not carry. 6 months later, he met my children. A year after that, we moved in together. Into my house, which had been mine from the beginning, and mine alone after the divorce. The kids liked him, respected him, which was more important. He didn't try to be their father, just a positive male presence, someone who showed them what a healthy relationship looked like. Was it perfect? No. We argued sometimes, misunderstood each other, worked through conflicts the way adults in healthy relationships do. But it was real, and it was mine. I had chosen it with clear eyes, not because I needed someone to pay my bills or complete my family, but because I wanted a companion for the journey. There's a difference. It took me 40 years to learn it. On the anniversary of my divorce being finalized, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and thought about everything. My marriage had lasted 14 years. My divorce had taken 2 months, and the rebuilding had taken another year after that. But I had done it. I had taken back my life. The house was paid off now thanks to aggressive extra payments and the restitution Darnell still owed. My kids were thriving. My career was flourishing. My heart had healed enough to let someone new in. And Darnell, last I heard, he was on his 3rd girlfriend since Brittany. Still struggling to make support payments. Still living in that studio apartment. Still, I imagine telling himself that none of this was his fault. Some people never learn, but I had learned. I had learned that being the strong one doesn't mean being the silent one, that taking care of your family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. that trusting your gut is more important than keeping the peace. And I had learned that when a man brings his mistress to your family dinner, sits her in your seat, and thinks you're too stupid to notice, sometimes the best thing you can do is smile, plan, and destroy him completely. So if you're out there listening to this and something in your life feels wrong, trust yourself. If the accounts don't add up, check them. If the stories don't make sense, question them. If your partner makes you feel crazy for noticing what's right in front of your face, you're not crazy. You're paying attention, and that's the first step. Don't wait 14 years like I did. Don't let them drain you until there's nothing left. Don't believe the lies that tell you to stay quiet, be patient, work it out. Some things can't be worked out. Some people can't be fixed. Some marriages need to end so you can begin. I am Monica James. I am a forensic accountant, a mother, a survivor, and now a thriver. He brought his mistress to my dinner table. I took everything he thought he owned, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Choose yourself. Document everything. Fight with everything you have. Your life is waiting on the other side, and it's better than you can imagine. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped you, if it gave you courage, if it showed you that there's another way, then sharing it was worth it. Now go, check those accounts, trust your gut, and never ever let a man underestimate you. You might just be his worst nightmare. I know I was.